I call the meeting to order. Good evening and welcome to the September 16th, 2024 study session of the Ashland City Council. Alyssa, do we have anyone who has signed up for public forum? No. Okay. So we will move right into our single agenda item this evening, which is our natural hazard mitigation plan update. Hi, Kelly.
Mayor, councilors, and city staff.
If you can turn on that mic. The red button.
Oh, there we go. It's got to be red. Good evening, Mayor, councilors, city staff. Thanks for the opportunity to present the updated natural hazard mitigation plan for the city of Ashland. This plan is an important step in ensuring that our community is well prepared for natural disasters and stays resilient in the face of our hazards.
Kelly, I'm having a hard time hearing you a little bit. I don't know if you can get that microphone a little bit closer.
How's that?
That's better. Yes.
Way better.
Thank you.
Okay. So where was I? While this is a study session, our focus is going to be on just informing and answering questions you guys might have about it. We did adopt this in February of 2020, and with council direction for some necessary changes and an expanded steering committee and stakeholder involvement, we've done all that over the last few months. The purpose of our natural hazard mitigation plan is to serve as a comprehensive strategy to reduce the risks posed by natural hazards, which would include wildfires, floods, earthquakes, drought, and severe weather events. The goal of the plan is ultimately to protect lives and property and our infrastructure while enhancing the city's resilience in the face of natural disasters. And an adopted plan allows us to apply for and accept FEMA grant mitigation funds. So it's one of the big ones that we need to keep maintaining and looking at further. Some of our updated things that we did with council direction is we did engage a wider range of stakeholders for this update. We engaged the planning department. Our original steering committee was mostly fire, and so what we did was expand it to other departments, and so we had water and wastewater and planning department and other people that are involved in there that have a stake in some of these plans. And then I engaged some other emergency management professionals, people who have worked in emergency management before and have helped develop and draw up plans, and their local community members as well. So those are all included in the plan. Let's see. We looked at our hazard analysis, our hazard table, and there were some pieces of it that it looked as if wildfire wasn't our number one thing. And I think we all know wildfire is our number one thing. And so working with Michael Howard of the University of Oregon and his team that helped put this together for us on a grant, I had them adjust those things. So you can see that reflected. I think it's page 19. And we just evaluated using our steering committee, like where we should be, like what's our number one hazard, what's our number two hazard, and so on and stuff. If you have any questions about that, I'm happy to address that. Some of the other things is we needed to add existing structures that are in our community that actually are part of our community lifelines. Mayor had a good point, like why don't we list our grocery stores? Grocery stores and grocery workers are essential services for us. If we have a major disaster somewhere around here, like we're going to depend on them as much as they depend on us to make sure that they have a good supply chain so that we can get our groceries. Finally, we made a tracking sheet for the changes. That's at the end of the document in attachment C. It just helps, it's going to help me in the emergency management program to make sure that we're revisiting the plan, we're making it relevant as we go forward. So tonight's session is just an opportunity for discussion and feedback to ensure that the council has a solid understanding of the updates and the direction of the plan. It's staff's recommendation that we try to readopt, we do a formal readoption of the updated plan on October 1st, the business meeting there. And readoption can reset our 5-year clock and push it forward a little more. Thanks for your time and any feedback you have.
All right. Questions? Councilor Dale.
Thank you, Mayor. Kelly, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I was glad you moved wildfire up to number one, because it's got to be number one. I mean, there's a distance tab. I mean,
Jeff, if you can get, you're for some reason, maybe
these aren't working.
Are people having a hard time hearing, or is it just me?
Yeah, it's something. Okay,
yeah,
thank
so
you.
We all just need to get in nice and close.
Yeah, so appreciate that. Thank you. I appreciate that, Kelly. Thanks for making wildfire number one, because that's exactly what it is and where it belongs. There's just zero question. So my question is, I'm going through this. Can you point out anything relative to wildfire in here where the stakeholders in the steering committee felt that we were doing what we should be doing better than average and where we're falling short? What do we need to know as a governing body to help us help you relative to wildfire?
Sure. I actually think some of the easiest things that we can pick out is our evacuation study. Like, we had the zones, we have zones now, and we're doing work to try to expand the drivable space of those zones. If you look at some of the road projects that have gone on, especially on Ashland Street out here, they had more designs for like putting those wonderful berms with plants in the middle of them to block drivable space. And as of last year, just by saying, hey, we should be keeping our evacuation routes more open, some of those got changed and shifted. The zones have expanded now to Jackson County. So Jackson County jumped on board, and now we have zones surrounding the city. What else could I tell you that's easy for wildfire? So I know what was the project? Yeah, I don't know. I was going to say Chris Chambers' project that he did with Lomakatsi and the helicopter logging, but I don't think that's FEMA grant mitigation funds.
Okay, yeah, I was kind of go down that road and just see if there's anything else that we can continue to do up there as well. But I'll ask Chris.
Oh, I would add that the water treatment plant should be a high priority. We did take a look at the landslide potential where our current water treatment plant sits just below Reeder Reservoir. And because we had the slide in '97 with the flooding there and we had to shut it down, we should be moving that up on the list of our priorities because our drinking water is absolutely essential to us. And if we get another big flood event or an earthquake, then that slide is endangering our water supply.
Yep. Could not agree more. Thank you.
So following along behind that question about the water treatment facility, when we've talked about it, we know that our analysis has shown, as you were just mentioning, that it's multiple hazards. It's not just landslides, but it's earthquake, wildfire, flooding. But the way this document has it listed, it only has it listed under landslides, if I see that correctly, in the table. And I'm wondering if there's a way to call out, if it makes sense to move it under a multi-hazard designation so that we can speak more specifically about the various hazards that the water treatment plant project is addressing.
That's a great idea.
Other questions? Councilor Hanson.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you, Kelly. I'm curious if you could share with us and anybody watching and listening. When I first arrived in Ashland, it was all about the Cascadia subduction zone. And, since then we've experienced so many wildfire events that, all of our eyes are on that as well. But could you tell us a little bit more about the preparedness of maybe those two different things and how the Cascadia event has it gone up in the hazard zone or less? And how scared should we be of that particular threat?
In our hazard analysis, we've put it at number 4 as kind of our greatest risk, because the Cascadia, while Ashland will be affected by it, we're going to be more affected by what's happening to the north and to the west of us. Our supply chain, we depend on the freeways to be open and that supplies come to us. And in a Cascadia event, our coastal towns, our cities that are north and to the west of us, they're going to be way more affected than we are, which means we might be the recipient of people who need a place to stay, like refugees, but we also are going to need to address maybe a supply chain shortage in that way. When we speak just specifically to earthquakes, I think we're talking about retrofitting buildings seismically. And I know that the high school's got a big project that's ongoing right now that's addressing the humanities building, which was as part of this. But currently, I'm not aware of any city projects and other buildings for seismic retrofitting, but that should be on the table at some point. We should be seeking those funds. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I just wanted to touch on it. And then the other thing I was wondering relative to the document, if we identify some transportation needs, like getting from one side of Ashland to the other, are there grant opportunities to help us bolster our transportation infrastructure? And I know that this part of this document's usefulness is to go after grants. Is there anything in that world to help?
So I think we can talk to Evan Brooks, our grant consultants, once this is approved, and let them know that these are some areas that they can look for grants for us.
Absolutely, and there really are so many grant opportunities out there. It is a difficult thing to try to track all the time and to find the right one, and your community has to qualify for them. If you look at EMPG grants, I was encouraged to start applying for one without them ever saying that you have to have a population of 80,000 people to do it. And so once I found that out, I'm like, why didn't you begin by telling me that? So grants, it's a wonderful place, but there's a lot to learn. And I'm sure there's some grant opportunities out there for enhancing transportation systems. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's a complex landscape at the moment in terms of grant proposals and
For
funding
sure.
opportunities at both the state and the federal level. So I know that the staff has been very successful at spotting and going after them. And so I'm sure that this will put us in good stead once we have it all done. But one question that I have is, we have a volcanic event mitigation strategy, which is really to kind of look and see if there's anything that can be done. But it seems that if we have a serious problem, what can be done is evacuation. And so I'm wondering, because it's on this list, and so at some point we'll have to decide where to put our priority. And I'm wondering if we want to actually leave it on this list, is it important enough for us to do anything but acknowledge that all of the evacuation work that we're doing for wildfire does dual duty for a volcanic event?
Yeah, I don't totally know how to answer that. I do know that of all of the hazards, because I've been learning a lot from a fellow volcanologist, someone who studies volcanoes. It's our Boise State University researcher that comes here. And just their description of like what actually happens if we were to have an event, like it is one of the most devastating things that could happen to our infrastructure, to our power lines, to our water system. And yet it's not likely at this point. It's just we still have to have it on the list. So are you asking if we should expand maybe more like how we would respond?
I'm wondering if I wouldn't want it to in any way outcompete something that is more likely. And it's
Yeah.
a hard conversation to have, because earthquake, how likely is that? We don't know. These are low likelihood, high magnitude events, and we need to be prepared for them. But I'm not aware of much that you can do to prepare for a volcanic event, but I do know there's a lot we can do to prepare for an earthquake.
Yeah.
Right? People are not necessarily going to evacuate in an earthquake. They're more likely to be asked to stay put. And whereas if we have a situation with a volcanic situation, I think we're mostly getting people out, and we are dealing with whatever is left when we come back. Unless there's something I don't understand about what activities we could put in place to have any bearing at all on the reality of that.
I think it's a great idea.
So I just wouldn't want that to outcompete something that was for wildfire or earthquake or some of the things that we can see real pathways to influence.
Correct. Yeah.
But it is the thing I know the least about of this entire list.
Yeah.
What happens in a volcano is that's different.
Yeah.
Other questions? Councillor Hyatt.
Thank you. Kelly, thank you so much. In looking at Table AA-3, the hazard analysis matrix and
Yes.
the prioritization in there, the tiering makes perfect sense to me. But then as I come down into the individual discussions on items, and I'm going to take air quality as the example, and the same is true, I think, for the drought item, where poor air quality probability is high and the vulnerability is high. How are we reconciling the probability and the vulnerability being high to it being a middle
mid-tier,
tier?
yeah.
And I think I have a line of sight on why, but I want to hear the steering committee and your opinion on why we're navigating that way.
I think the steering committee and we all feel like every year we're going to have days, and potentially, I can't remember what year it was, where we had like 2 weeks of over 200 smoke or something, just probably one of the worst years on record. And it's the transient nature of that air quality time. So while it's definitely a mid-tier, it's not the thing that's like the wildfire that could take everything, right? Or the earthquake that could take everything, or the extreme heat event that's actually going to harm many people in our population that don't have access to air conditioning or that are more susceptible to the heat. So the air quality one still remains a mid-tier with some of that reasoning.
So the crux of it then, if I'm understanding it correctly, is the tiering also has to consider things like infrastructure, impact to that infrastructure, and its ability to persist and support the community. So the air quality doesn't take out the electric grid. And as a result, though it is a high probability, high vulnerability, it remains mid-tier because the impact to infrastructure and sustainable systems that support our community is technically less.
Technically, yes. I couldn't have said it better.
I have a question back to the wildfire, the elements here. We're working right now on our community wildfire protection plan and working to update that. It would seem that that would be a useful thing to put on this list as well, because we'll then be looking to implement it, and then we could reference back to the fact that it's in this plan. I know it's underway, and sometimes when we have something underway, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to put it in a plan, but some of the other things we're continuing on with in here. And so I'm just wondering if there would be a reason not to include that.
I want to say it is part of the city plans that are in here, and there's a mention that we're doing the update, hoping to be publishing the CWPP, if that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it makes sense to list it in the table as a specific action.
You know what? I thought it was, but let me take a moment.
Maybe I'm just missing it.
There's quite a bit in here. I know it gets mentioned in some of the paragraphs.
Yeah.
But perhaps it could be added to the table just to clarify
Well, and I know
that.
it is spoken about in the body of the document, but I think a lot of folks are going to go to the table and be
see what
looking
we're
at that
doing.
as, what is the priority? And so I think it could be helpful to have it included there. And then I have another question about wildfire, and this one's a question to the council as well. Because we know that this process is to assess what our risks are and then to try to figure out how do we invest around those risks. And we just had the conversation about volcanoes and what does that look like. We know they have to be included in here. They're a risk. But then the question is, how much energy do we put into the different pieces of this? And when I look at the wildfire list, those are all important things, and we have a lot of those underway. And the city of Ashland has done a lot of work on wildfire over time. There's no question about that. My question is, what do we think is enough? Where do we get to the point where we have said we have a fire-adapted community to the best of our ability, and we are now in kind of a maintenance space where we're not trying to catch up a backlog of vegetation, of how people are taking care of their homes, of building materials. We know we're not going to people are not going to reside all of their houses in Ashland, but in terms of the things that we can control with some amount of, with community engagement and all of that, do we have any idea what that looks like? And it's okay if we don't today, but I think it might be a conversation for the council with our emergency management staff to say what actually is that point we're aiming for with all of the things we're doing here, and are the things we're doing and are the investments we're making enough to get us to that line? And this, we don't have that information, and we may not have it tonight, but I just want to get to that question because I think oftentimes we know we're doing good work. We know it means something. We know that when we had fires just outside of town, I was very grateful that we had been doing so much good work for so long, but then the question still remains, is there a gap between what we're doing and what we need to do that we would really be able to quantify on the other side of a major wildfire that we could get after now? So I know that's a tougher question.
I have a few things, and I would be happy to share those with you, like in an email or something. But there are a few more things that we could and should be doing. And are we ever going to get everybody to have a fire-adapted home? I don't know.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's fair. There's never going to be zero risk in Ashland. But what is that place where we think we really need to get to? And I don't know, for the rest of the council, do we want to have that specific conversation before we come into the budget cycle, so that we have a better idea of what are we doing to invest in what our community has said is the top concern that they have? Is that, in terms of our process, which is separate from this one, do we want to have a deeper dive before we go into the budget process? Yeah, go ahead, Councilor Hyatt.
My initial thought would be yes, because in having those things defined, therefore you are then accountable to them, they are measurable, and you can rise to the level or see where you are short and need to restack your resources accordingly to meet a target goal. Having those defined is important because many of these things do require not only financial resources, but also time resources. So they need to be evaluated in those two lanes. It would be wonderful, like if we had the dollars and we're like, yes, let's do this, but we only have one Kelly. So how are we looking at it through both of those lenses? That will be critical. I think it's like, yes, definitely, you need the list, you need the items, you need to be accountable to them, but we also need to resource them, not only financially within the budget cycle, but also time-wise within what's available through the city manager's office and our associated staffing resources.
I would just say, too, that as it's not a new conversation, the CWPP that we've been working on as well has a lot of details for, like, we should be trying to get to this line and this line and this line. So it's a good place to start the list.
Yeah. And I think, too, when we think about resourcing, there's also the question of community partnerships and who else might have something to bring to the table in terms of our community partners if we kind of broaden the conversation out, building on the CWPP, building on this plan that we have here, to have that bigger conversation of what is the city's unique part of this and what is the residents' part and what are, the parts of other major community anchors. Yeah, I think that could be a useful conversation to have, seems. Are there any other questions for Kelly this evening on the plan? Councilor Hyatt.
Thank you. Just one last thing confirming, Kelly. I know we had started to discuss offline the annexation piece. Are we resolved there?
Yes, we are. Actually, I reached out to Brandon Goldman, and he gave me the 2 parcels that we've had. You were correct on
Excellent.
the Beach Creek, and then there's the parcel that's out off of Washington and Jefferson that's a commercial space. And then there was one more that was applied for, but it didn't happen because there's public input on it.
yeah.
So I've added both of those, and I also added the Jackson County Library, Ashland
wonderful.
branch. Yeah,
Thank you so much for looking at those.
you bet.
Great. Well, it looks like there are no more questions, so thank you, Kelly. This process that you have undertaken on our behalf is a really important part of our ability to understand what our changing risk profile looks like and to appropriately respond to it. And I think this, it's an addendum to the county's plan. We understand that. But this piece of it is really about us. It's really about our community and what do we need to do and how do we understand how these risks are changing. And so I know this has been a lot of work, and all of that engagement that you've done to get to this point to where you can come back and really tell the comprehensive story of what are the potential risks that could really hurt this community and put us in a completely different place. And so I just wanted to say thank you. This is a really good body of work, and I think the council is going to be really well served by it, as will the rest of the community. So any final comments before we close out? Great. Well, thank you again, Kelly.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that we make this plan relevant for us for years to come. So let's keep up the work. Even if we have to do extra work, let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, anything else from the council? All right, meeting is adjourned.